air excavation on this magnolia tree. And you can see some of the symptoms of the problem here on the tree. You've got a bunch of dead and declining tissue, thinning of the canopy. Basically, this tree was planted about 6 to 8 inches below grade. It's too deep. And so what all that fill soil on top of the root ball does is it blocks oxygen from getting to the roots. And the roots need oxygen every bit as much as they need water. So if the roots can't get the oxygen that they need, it causes a great deal of stress on the tree. And this is very symptomatic of that stress. So what the solution is to get in here either with hand tools, or in this case a pneumatic tool, to blow the dirt out to expose the root flare. Okay, the root flare is this part down here where the tree starts transitioning from the trunk to the buttress roots. And you can see that soil level is up here, but that flare is down here. So you had several inches of that flare buried. Now this is still trunk tissue right here. So what happens when the trunk tissue stays wet, that causes a lot of stress for the tree. This trunk tissue is not adapted to being wet for long periods of time. It's actually physically different tissue than these roots, which can tolerate being wet for a long period of time. What it does is it slows down the flow of nutrients down the stem and water up the stem, which creates stress for the tree. So what we see here is that we've got a tangled mess of roots, not all of which are bad. You have your fine fibrous roots here, which absorb your water and nutrients. And then you've got your larger roots here, which are structural in nature and which are basically conductors of the resources that the small ones take up to deliver to the rest of the tree. So you can see over here on this side that we have this root crossing over the flare right here and wrapping over this main structural root. That's what we call a girdling root. As this root continues to grow, it will develop and get larger in diameter. But the trunk is also trying to increase in diameter. So they're in conflict right here. And what's going to happen is this root is going to start digging into this trunk. That's going to further reduce the flow of nutrients up the stem, water up the stem, and sugars that the leaves produce down the stem. So we want to remove this. If we remove this, it's like taking a rubber band out from around your arm. It's going to allow the blood to flow, okay? So we're going to cut this root on two sides, here and here, and we're going to pry it out of there. We want to use a sharp tool to make clean cuts wherever possible so that the wound will heal and not allow decay in, but you can actually feel, it's hard to see on the camera I'm sure, but there's an indentation right here where that root was digging into that trunk there already. We have several smaller ones that are not to the level of a girdling root yet, but it would just make sense to go ahead and take them off as preventive maintenance, just to get out in front of it and make sure that they do not develop into girdling roots. When we're done, we're going to fill in this hole back up to the appropriate level so that the soil level is right at the flare. And we're going to remove any other bad roots that we see in here. Some of this grass can come out of here too. And then we're going to mulch the tree, but we're going to mulch it to where we have no more than 3 inches in thickness of the mulch, and the mulch tapers down and stops before it hits the root flare, so that the mulch doesn't act like the soil has been holding that moisture up against it.